Most are afraid of unknown depths, skirting shores thinking world flat, and with the island girls in celebration of new religion. Nobody led me or said this way. I sailed alone on makeshift raft with wind as companion. Fate for deliverance, confidence enough to assess new disposition. Seekers of lost paradise may seem fools to those who never sought the other worlds. Welcome to Momentary Zen with Zen Garcia. Visit www.fallenangels.tv. You're listening to Revolution Radio.
And he said unto me, in the beginning, when the earth was made, before the borders of the world stood, or ever the winds blew, before it thundered and lightened, or ever the foundations of paradise were laid, before the fair flowers were seen, or ever the movable powers were established, before the innumerable multitude of angels were gathered together, or ever the heights of the air were lifted up, before the measures of the firmament were named, or ever the chimneys in Sion were hot, and ere the present years were sought out, and or ever the inventions of them that now sin were turned, before they were sealed that have gathered faith for a treasure. Then did I consider these things, and they all were made through me alone, and through none other. By me also they shall be ended, and by none other, saith the Most High. 2 Ezra chapter 6, verses 1 through 6. Welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining us this evening. I'm your host, Zen Garcia. This is Momentary Zen here on Revolution Radio. And it's a great honor to be with all of you and fellowship in this manner. I will be covering the questions, answers, commentary, and inquiries that many of you have made over the past 3 months. Since December, I have tried to maintain and keep up with the number of inquiries that are being brought in, that if you have a question or you'd like to share something of interest or anything of that nature, then please just contact Carol through sacredwordpublishing.net or fallenangels.tv, and she will make certain that the question is compiled and placed together on the running list that we have, and at some point I will get to it and I will address it in deeper manner than if you were just to contact me directly and I just responded quickly, because I am overwhelmed with email and commentaries on our YouTube videos, whether through Endeavor Freedom, our main YouTube site, or that of Zen Garcia, the secondary channel. And it's difficult for me to respond to all of them, because otherwise that would be all that I could really muster the energy and the time to do. And so know that I do try to at least read most of them, but that because the numbers that we receive daily, I'm not able to respond to each in elaborate manner. But during the radio shows, I have a better chance. And I'm also going to try to remember to save at least some time to open up the phone lines at the ends of shows so that if you'd like to call in directly, that you would have the capacity to do so. But um, and so, anyways, this evening, that's what I'm going to try to do is get through this list. We are a little bit behind, but it's been, I guess, about a month or so since I've done one of these shows. And so, if you have any questions, I ask that you address them to either Laurel Austin or Carol Austin in the chat room, especially if it's not near the breaks, then they will make sure that I get them and that I can answer them in the chat. And also for those that are trying to join us for live broadcast, because I know that many of you are and that you are wanting to participate in the live chat, that the only way you can do so is if you join us while we are airing live. And that would be on Wednesday evenings, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern at freedomslips.com. That when you go to freedomslips.com, that's Revolution Radio, you will enter into the chat. You have to have a handle in order to be recognized and to ask questions. But then you are just going to click the play button at the very top of the page. You'll see Studios A and Studio B, that there are two 24-hour channels that will be available to you when you come to the live stream. And we will be on Studio B from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern. And so you just simply have to join that. And then once you're into the live stream, you can keep up with the fellowship that's going on, which usually there's a lot of chit chat and a lot of discussion and a lot of links and things of that nature being shared. And I'm grateful to both Carol and Laurel for facilitating that for me. I appreciate you ladies for having done so. Also, on Thursday evenings, if you're wanting to catch us for those broadcasts, then you just go to truthfrequencyradio.com and we will be live streaming from 9 to 11 p.m. Eastern. And that if you enter or go to the actual station during that time, then you will see the live chat as it goes down, and that you will be able to share communication with us during this time. And so that's how you participate in the actual live chat. And I'm going to go ahead and get into it. I do want to quickly update those of you that do follow our work, that we have released several new titles. My daughter-in-law, Joy, she has edited and formatted the Thomas Winship, the Zetetic Cosmogony, which is a excellent, excellent book. One of those that I like, Terra Firma or the Samuel Burley Robotham, Zetetic Astronomy. I definitely recommend people read and study this one. It is top of the line with regard to its content. And also, we released Lady Blunt, a songwriter's story, which is another really incredible flat Earth, but it's a fiction story of an aristocrat that leaves her failed marriage in order to become a trendsetter, and she begins to speak on flat Earth and zetetic cosmogony all over the world. in this particular book, and so it shares the speeches and the dialogue and the facts that she utilizes to convince people and to make them uh, view the world in reconsideration. And so those are two of the flat earth titles that we've released. You can find them at lulu.com under the flat earth store, or you can go to flatearthstore.store or to flatearth.company is the other title. And also, she released the Kebra Nagas, which is the Ethiopic book, The Glory of Kings, one of their most prized, most renowned, and respected ancient manuscripts. And this particular text, chapter 100, has greater insight and greater elaboration on the fall of the angels and the Genesis 6 occurrence than most other texts besides like the book of Enoch. But when it comes to explaining and detailing, you can hardly beat chapter 100 on the fall of the angels found within the Kebra Nagas. And so I do recommend people check that out as well. And also last week I released the Secret Instructions of the Jesuits, which is a text that was released to the public clandestinely in 1601. And it's very interesting to read and to study, and it shows you how it was that the Jesuits had it down to a science as to how they would take over people's fortunes and even wrestle them away from their children, sort of like what Scientology does now. Same kind of modus operandi, um, but very intriguing text. Let me see. And I'm still working on the Ancient Prophecies of Christ, which I'm hoping to release hopefully within 3 weeks. I'm just doing one final read through, and then I should be able to let it go. At some point, really, as a writer or a poet, you really just have to abandon that which you are working on, because otherwise, you could stay focused on it forever. And there's always something to fix, something you could make a little bit better that could read in different manner, be stated in different opinion. And so at some point, you just have to let it go. All right. I do believe that's all we released for last week. And so, which is quite a bit. All right. If you have questions, remember, I will try to get them during the break, and that I will go and peruse that. So, all right. I did spend the afternoon reading through some of these, and so I am hoping that I can elaborate. And so we're going to begin with Irvin. Irvin asks about the book of Urantia. The question or message: my question is whether or not you heard or read any of the papers in the book of Urantia. If so, what's your take on it? I live in Australia and would love to get your books, but I don't see a space for overseas orders or the shipping fees. Keep up the good work. I love it. It pulled the whole Bible together for me. Well, thank you, Irvin. Also, for those that are listeners from different parts of the world, I recommend that if you are trying to start a collection of our material, that you begin with those books that you can get freely delivered to you through Amazon. Like, for instance, if you're in Australia, amazon.au, and that often many of our titles will be carried by the different Amazons, and they will offer free shipping because um, we are so widely read that most of the Amazons from all over the different parts of the world, they are stocking at least some of the titles of our books. And so I would begin with those to gain access to the free shipping. Um, Also, if you contact me directly, that of course I can always look up the postage and then quote you a price for shipping them to you. And that whenever I do so, I will autograph them, personalize them for you free of charge. But you will have to pay the cost of shipping, which is extravagant, um, especially if you live in, some of these far off places, which we have shipped all over the world. And so I'm pretty familiar with the different price trends according to, however many books. Um, but if you do want to order and you are ordering from a different part of the world, I do recommend that you get at least 3 books because the shipping is going to be just about the same. And that if you get more, it it's cheaper than buying one or two individually, different parts of the time of the year, because you're going to have to Canada, Australia, Iceland, New Zealand. There's going to be at least a one time. It's going to be over $50 to ship to those places, and if you add just a few extra titles, it won't be maybe $10 more, and so you might as well take advantage of that kind of situation. And then the other thing for our overseas readers is that every once in a while, if you contact us to let us know that you are interested in an overseas shipment, I can wait until there's a specific deal that is offered through Lulu, which is one of our predominant portals for selling our books, that they will offer 10% discount as well as 50% off shipping, which is for those of you that live abroad is a really really good deal. And so do let us know, and oftentimes we can provide you a discount for bulk orders, but I do recommend that first. And also there's an entire section on the website at sacredwordpublishing.net and .com of digital books, and so that's another format you can take advantage of as well. Now, with regard to the Book of Urantia, I have it and I have read portions of it. Um, I, with regard to truth, it didn't really resonate with me so much, and the reason being is because in reading it, it had no mention of the seed of the serpent, and to me, that is such a huge part of the puzzle, and one that is mostly unknown and unheard of and unmentioned by most authors and most books on the timeline of creation and what occurred over the history of humanity. If there's not a mention of the war between the bloodlines, then that it's missing such a huge part of the puzzle that really I don't even want to, to waste my time studying from something that misses that huge. And this goes with other radio show hosts and other individuals as well, that if they're not mentioning about the wheat and the tares and the enmity between the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent, I really don't even spend much time listening to their information. because again, in my opinion, that is such a huge facet of what we are contending with, and how it links to even the war in heaven, the enmity between the seed lines, as it plays out now between the New World Order elites and humanity. That, again, if it's missing this component as far as truth, um, I, I just don't have time to waste anymore. There was a time when I would just put something on just to listen, or while I'm working, or I would listen to specific individuals that I really admired and respected. Um, but now I just don't have the time or the luxury to do that. I want to focus on those that know, and are sharing truth in profound manner. I do, listen to others as far as different topics, but when it comes to just the whole scenario, or the big picture, um, again, it's important, in my opinion, that, I mean, Christ called this in Matthew 13, uh, I will utter secrets that have been kept. I will utter secrets that have been kept since the foundations of the world. And I mean, this is such an important concept. And then the other thing with regard to the Urantia is just, there's all the New Age leanings, and it's not prophetic with regard to how the Bible is 100% prophetic, which, in my opinion, shows that it was inspired by the mind of the Most High God, and that if I had a choice to read and study um, something which I consider to be either channeled information, or something that is truly, I know without question, from the mind of the Most High, then of course I'm going to select to read and study that which is inspired. Just my personal choice, which is why I don't read a lot of fiction, and why I only mostly study nonfiction texts, ancient manuscripts. That All right, going on. Scotty Scotty T asks, "Hi Zen, blessings to you. I was wondering what recommendation you would give on which of your books I should start out with. May the Most High bless you." Thank you, Scotty. I appreciate that. And a lot of people, because we have put out so much material, have this same question. And so, and again, it all goes back to what your interest is. And so, if you are interested in the bigger picture, and you want to know how all the ancient mysteries and the gospel riddles, and the what we see with regard to the ancient aliens and all that, how all that comes together, I advise people read the first two books of the Great Contest trilogy, The War in Heaven and The Enmity Between the Sea Lines. And the third one, which I will be writing or revising, it's mostly already written, but I will be revising very shortly. In fact, it's the book that I'm going to be focused on next, after completing this ancient prophecies of Christ. Um, that those three books cover from A to Z, from Genesis to Revelation, and all things in between. And that the pre-Adamic, the antediluvian age, what led to the first world age, how it connects to the second world age, this last 6,000 years of modern humanity, the story of Genesis 2, the Adam, um, Ha Adam, that, the I recommend those books. Now, if you're interested in, for instance, the cosmology and the truth of, with regard to, um, where we live, how the stars and the sun, the moon, the calendar, how all those things move and are incorporated into uh, our observance and keeping track of the passing of time and the specifics of this dimensionality, how heaven and earth and Sheol come together and join in union, then I recommend the Flat Earth and Firmament Paradise trilogies. The Flat Earth as key to decrypt the Book of Enoch, the Firmament vaulted dome of the earth, and Paradise, the sides of the north, and the Mount of the Congregation. That those three books, you can find incredible amounts of information on these topics and bring them to accountability and to greater insight. Um, then, really, I mean, I don't know of any other trilogy out there which covers it in great detail as that three book set. Yes, the flat Earth, and there's many people writing about it as topic, but um, embracing that possibility, I was able to unlock, decipher the entire book of Enoch, the book on the courses of the heavenly luminaries, which had remained riddle for at least the last 500 years, if not longer. And so that is an interesting read with regard to its connections to the book of Enoch. But also, the second book on the firmament, I don't really think there is another book out there written on the firmament as it relates to the covering, the solid structure, the rakia, in enclosing the circle of the earth that covers over the vaulted dome of the earth, that covers over the circle of the earth. And so, at least when I wrote it, there was nothing else like it available. And then the third is how, the details of the cosmology with regard to the book on the courses of the heavenly luminaries, and also uh, the um, the Vedic cosmology, the Srimad Bhagavatam, um, how all that is connected to and tied with, for instance, the magnetic mountain at the center of our Earth plane, the whirlpool which surrounds it that causes the tidal rhythms and which leads as entry, hollow earth entry into the depths of Sheol. That this is called the opening of the bottomless pit, and that again found at the North Pole leads into the interior of the earth. So all of those things, the many passages which are connected to um, the Mount of the Congregation, the sides of the north, paradise, all of that. I mean, it's all found in that. And then if you're interested in, for instance, like the Acts of the Apostles or the Testaments, that, I've compiled all that information for you, or the infancy Gospels with relation to the life and the story of Christ, the early childhood, infancy, and lost years, that the Gospel of Gamaliel, which has more information about the Passion of Christ than all the Gospels and Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, all put together in one story. I mean, it is an incredibly elaborate, over 100 pages just on the Passion of Christ and the death of the Virgin Mary, as well as the martyrdom of Pontius Pilate. So, really incredible story. And so, it all depends on what you're interested in with regard to. Now, if one final subject matter, if you're interested in the antediluvian age, the destruction and the reformation of the earth, um, then, and also the rule of the dragon lords, the Anunnaki, and how that all ties into our pre-existence and who we are, the Atlantean myths and the mythos and mythologies of the world, um, that you can find all of this information in specifically Sons of God, who we are, why we are here, and the Skyfall, the Angels of Destiny. That if you review those two particular books, you'll have all of the information about pre-existence and who we are, why we're here, the larger questions of our life and being. And and so yeah, those two particular texts. But if you know are interested in a certain area, a certain topic, certain issue, just contact me and I will, guide you as best I can with which books cover what. As there's a lot of information out there that we put together. All right, this is from Leanne A. She says, I was listening to a man from Wild Branch Ministries. He blew me away. Was that he didn't think that God planted the tree of knowledge of good and evil in the garden. He believed that Satan did. We know that the enemy snuck into the garden, so why wouldn't he have done that as well? He wanted desperately to reproduce, and what better way? It would be easier to get Eve to eat the fruit that he planted himself. It is, after all, the fruit from that tree that produced the fruit and the seed of the serpent. Um, so, how can bad fruit come from a good tree? And there are texts which allude to this specific thing. And I'll read, let me actually go. I'll read from it and then I'll come back to this other stuff. But you can find mention of that it was divine, planted by Satan in Baruch chapter 4, or actually Baruch third, the book of Baruch, the third book of Baruch. And you can also find mention of this in the Genesis Apocryphon, which is a Dead Sea Scrolls text. So I'll share this with you very quickly, and then we'll move on. But it says this, just to give you an idea, because there are mentions of this in several texts, but off of hand, these are two that I was able to quickly get to. It says, and I said, I pray thee, show me which is the tree which led Adam astray. And the angel said to me, it is the vine, which, that's what it's mentioned as in several other places too, that the fruit comes from a vine, sort of like grape clusters. All right, continue. It is the vine which the angel Samael planted, whereat the Lord God was angry, and he cursed him and his plant. Well, also on this account he did not permit Adam to touch it, and therefore the devil, being envious, deceived him through his vine. And I, Baruch, said, since also the vine has been the cause of such great evil and is under judgment of the curse of God, and was the destruction of the first created, how is it now so useful? And the angel said, thou askest aright. When God caused the deluge upon earth and destroyed all flesh and 409,000 giants, and the water rose 15 cubits above the highest mountains, then the water entered into paradise and destroyed every flower. But it removed wholly without the bounds the shoot of the vine and cast it outside. And when the earth appeared out of the water and Noah came out of the ark, he began to plant of the plants which he had found. But he found also the shoot of the vine, and he took it, and was reasoning in himself, what then is it? And I came, and I spake to him the things concerning it. And he said, shall I plant it, or what shall I do? Since Adam was destroyed because of it, let me not also meet with the anger of God because of it. And saying these things, he prayed that God would reveal to him what he should do concerning it. And when he had completed the prayer, which lasted 40 days, and having besought many things and wept, he said, Lord, I entreat thee to reveal to me what I shall do concerning this plant. But God sent his angel Sarasael, and said to him, arise, Noah, and plant the shoot of the vine. For thus saith the Lord, its bitterness shall be changed into sweetness, and its curse shall become a blessing. And that which is produced from it shall become the blood of God. And as through it the human race obtained condemnation, so again through Jesus Christ the Emmanuel will they receive in him the upward calling and the entry into paradise. Know therefore, O Baruch, that as Adam through this very tree obtained condemnation and was divested of the glory of God, so also the men who now drink insatiably the wine which is begotten of it transgress worse than Adam, and are far from the glory of God, and are surrendering themselves to the eternal fire. For no good comes through it. For those who drink it to surfeit do these things, neither does a brother pity his brother, nor a father his son, nor children their parents, but from the drinking of wine come all evils, such as murders, adulteries, fornications, perjuries, thefts, and such like. And nothing good is established by it. All right, when we, there's another question a little bit later, which speaks about the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, as revealed in the Colburn Bible. And so when we get to that point, I'll elaborate a little bit further on the text and, with regard to this tree being planted by Satan. All right. Also, in the book of Revelation, there will be the tree of life, but no mention of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. For those that don't know fully the story of the fall of humanity, that and the differentiation between paradise and the Garden of Eden, that it is in paradise where the Garden of God, where Adam and Eve used to live and used to be, that paradise is numbered as the place of the righteous. It's considered to be the place of rest. It's also where the city of God, New Jerusalem, is located. And so when you understand that paradise is where we were from, and that according to Paul, it is found at the third heaven, and that the third heaven is above the vaulted dome, that it is there that the the angels of the Most High, the cherubim that were put into place to protect the tree of life, it is in a different dimensionality, and we are not able to eat. And the reason that Adam and Eve were cast out before they were able to eat from it is so that they wouldn't be locked in forevermore to a fallen state. And so that's the distinction. And that's why God cast them out. He didn't want us to be caught up forevermore in what is, a fallen form, in a fallen way of being. And so the cherubim protect the tree of life, and it is not here on the earth, but it is above the vaulted dome. And so I'll read just a couple of passages. In the Targum, which gives a little bit more detail as to the story of Genesis 3 and how Adam and Eve were cast out, um, where it says in verse 23, therefore the Lord God sent him forth from the Garden of Eden to till the ground from whence he was taken. So he drove out the men and placed at the east of the Garden of Eden cherubims and a flaming sword which turned every way to keep the way of the tree of life. Well, when you read from the Targum, you get a lot more detail and you gain clarity as to, yes, paradise, their former estate, is not here upon the earth, and that they were cast down to the earth from this place, and that this place is where the tree of life is currently being held. And so it says this. And the Lord God made to Adam and to his wife vestures of honor from the skin of the serpent which he had cast from him. Upon the skin of their flesh, instead of that adornment which had been cast away, and he clothed them. And the Lord God said to the angels who ministered before him, behold, Adam is sole on the earth, as I am sole in the heavens above. And it will be that they will arise from him who will know to discern between good and evil. Had he kept the commandments which I appointed to him, he would have lived and subsisted as the tree of life forever. But now, because he had not kept that which I prescribed, it is decreed against him that we keep him from the Garden of Eden, before he reach forth his hand and take of the tree of life. For behold, if ye eat thereof, living he will live and subsist forever. And the Lord God removed him from the Garden of Eden, and he went and dwelt on Mount Moriah to cultivate the ground from which he had been created, or at least his body had been created. And he drave out the man from thence where he had made to dwell the glory of his Shekinah, at the first between the two cherubim, before he had created the world. That's another thing with regard to paradise. It was created first, before this fallen world was created. And the only reason this fallen world was created was to account for the rebellion of the angels that um, wanted to try to overthrow the Most High. He created the law. He prepared the Garden of Eden for the righteous that they might eat and delight themselves with the fruit of the tree. All right. One other thing, when you look in Revelation 2:7, it says, he that hath an ear, let him hear what the Spirit saith unto the churches. To him that overcometh will I give to eat of the tree of life, which is in the midst of the paradise of God. And it also says in a different portion that um, remember from whence thou art fallen. I believe that's Revelation 2:1. And so those two things are tied together. All right, let me go back to questions. I have a lot more on it, but I don't want to elaborate on every question too much because we'll never get through these. All right, Fran N asks, I'm starting a Torah study meeting and thought that heard you mention you have a directory. Please let me know if you do and how I can add our Shabbat listing. Shalom, Fran. Yes, Fran, there's an entire web page on Facebook. It's called the Zen Zones, and it's about our meetups, the different groups of different people that knowing about these different things that we have all been reading and studying and learning about. If you want to get together with other people that also know about and have these deeper understandings with regard to truth, that you can list there where you are where your meetings are taking place, and how others can contact you. And then those that are from similar area, um, you can be put in contact with each other and share your information and then start your Torah groups. All right, continuing. Regla Girl asks, is there anywhere you could direct me if I wanted to search what happened to the clothing Jesus wore? You can find in the gospel account, it's cited that prophecy that they would cast lots for his clothes and that it would be split up amongst those that won. They were gambling for his vestures. And so that's really the only thing that I can say about that. Now, there is an entire other story on the vestures of honor, which were just mentioned in this particular text, that you can find a lot of detail on the initial clothes that were made for Adam and Eve by the Most High God, that they had supernatural capacity, and that these vestures were um, passed down from Adam to Enoch, from Enoch to Noah, Noah to Shem, and they were stolen. They were supposed to be given to Shem, but Ham stole them and gave them to his children, passed them down through his line, and they eventually were given to Nimrod. And then Esau, when he killed Nimrod, he took them from him, and this was right before he gave up his birthright for a bowl of porridge, according to the text. Um, and that afterwards, there's one other mention that these vestures go from Esau and somehow are returned, I believe, to the line of David. And Solomon is the last person that is mentioned as having them, if I'm correct. I'll do another show on that at some point. It's a very interesting story, but I don't have my notes before me right now. But if you want to know more, you can look up on YouTube Adam's Vestures of Power. All right, this question is about Mud Fossil and his belief on the giants, that the mountains and many of the what we see as far as trees or stumps, that these different what we consider to be mountains are in truth the carcasses of giants and also the petrified remains of ancient trees. Um, and if you don't know, I did a show on this. It's called the Antediluvian Trees, Angels, Giants, and something else I forget. But anyways, you can listen to that show where I speculate and I read from a lot of text as to what the size of ancient man, even that Adam was considered and mentioned in the Gospel of Bartholomew as being 80 cubits tall, and also the that Eve was considered to be 50 cubits tall, which is huge, 90 feet in its smallest measurement. Which again, in my opinion, the fact that our ancient ancestors lived up to 979 years, I believe it was, from Methuselah, Adam lived 930 years, that up until the time of Noah, that he also lived 900 years. But afterwards, after the flood, the statures and also the lifespans of humanity, as well as that of the giants, were reduced. That it says in the book of Enoch that the giants' lifespans went from seeming immortality to 500 years. And for humanity, it was reduced to 120 years by the life of Moses. But that Shem, he lived 600 years after the first generation of the children of Noah. But by the time of Abraham, who also lived during the time of Noah and Shem, that he was reduced in stature and lifespan to 175 years. And even Noah was considered to be a giant. That according to Jonathan Gray and to Ron Wyatt, that the bones of Noah's wife were said to be 14 feet tall, and that Noah was considered to be over 18 feet tall. Which again, because all of our ancestors were what we would consider to be giants today, but the giants of old, according to the book of Enoch, sized, and I know this is difficult for people to wrap their minds around, but it is said that they were 450 feet tall. And when you look at some of the stumps of these trees, like Devil's Tower, and some of these supposed mountains or mesas, they look like the stumps of trees that have been sawn off. And so if everything grew large, which everything did, even like the dragonflies back in the antediluvian times, they had a wingspan of 6 feet long. Can you imagine a dragonfly with a wingspan of 6 feet? How huge it had to have been. And so, those are just a few things to consider with regard to this whole particular topic. Um, yes, I do absolutely believe that there is something to it, and that a lot of what Peter calls the world that then was, that a lot of that organic material has become fossilized. And because it is fossilized, we think of it as natural rock formations. All right, we'll be right back.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
All right, welcome back, everybody, for our second hour. I'm your host, Zen Garcia. This is Momentary Zen here on Revolution Radio. If you'd like to join us in the live chat, you can do so every Wednesday evening, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern. Go to freedomslips.com, enter the chat room, and just click on the play button for Studio B, and you will be joining us for the live broadcast. All right. The next question has to do with the Pre-Adamites and fallen angels and the differences between the Genesis 1 and 26 through 28 creation and that of the Genesis 2, verse 7, with regard to modern humanity. So the question is, how were the fallen angels allowed to mislead the Pre-Adamites, and were the Pre-Adamites tested by God like Adam and Eve? Which I think those are all very relevant questions, and it is also cited in different manner by different people as to whether the Pre-Adamites had souls um, or an eternal inheritance. And some people say no, and that it was only with Adam that the Ruach Hakodesh, the Holy Spirit, that part of him which connects to Yahweh Elohim, was placed within him, and that this is something new. But the Kolbrin Bible speaks about how if you have consciousness, and that all things in the creation do have consciousness, and that because of that we're all from the force of God and have a connecting link to the Godhead, that everything has that um, Christ within, or the kingdom within. But do I know this with a certainty? No, I do not know that with a certainty. But I would say that, in my opinion, that even with animals, that if it has consciousness, and that even animals and trees, the stones, stars, even stars are considered to be celestial entities, angels, and they have consciousness, and they have an aspect which is eternal. And so, again, this is all my opinion, but I do believe that, with regard to animals and to living entities and beings, that consciousness is what imbues it with life, and that consciousness comes from the Most High God and is our connecting link to it. Now, I never met a Pre-Adamite. I don't know what they really look like, other than from the skeletons, the Neanderthal, Cro-Magnon, all that. But they were hominids. They were humanoids, and so I would think that they would have some kind of consciousness. But um, with regard to what kind of beings they were, I'm going to share that with you here, and I'm going to read from the Sumerian texts and their descriptions of experimenting genetically and also engaging directly in sexuality with these particular beings and what they look like. And in my opinion, they were Bigfoot type, hominid type beings, quite different from modern humanity. And then the whole thing with regard to the extraterrestrials or the ancient aliens as being the creators of modern humanity, that, in my opinion, that's all a lie and part of what is the strong delusion. And so, and so I, when I read this, just keep that in mind, and then I'll elaborate on, the how it was that modern man came on the scene, and how that was a surprise to the Anunnaki, according to their own words. But it says this: "How right you are, my sister," Enke said, smiling. "A secret of the Abzu let me to you all reveal. the being that we need, it already exists. They're speaking about creating a primitive worker, a slave, which is what the fallen angels tried to do with the pre-Adamites, was to create a slave race. In my opinion, that was one of the reasons why the Most High created modern humanity, and then through it would be through modern humanity that they would be judged and that they would um, be cast out into outer darkness. But continuing, all that we have to do is put on it the mark of our essence. Thereby, a Lulu, a primitive worker, shall be created. So did Enki say to them. Let us hereby a decision make, a blessing to my plan give, to create a primitive worker by the mark of our essence to fashion him. So was Enki to the leaders, saying, that being that we need, it already exists. Thus did Enki to them a secret of the Abzu reveal. With astonishment did the other leaders Enki's words hear. By the words they were fascinated. Creatures in the Abzu there are, Enki was saying, that walk erect on two legs. Their forelegs they use as arms. With hands they are provided. Among the animals of the steppe they live. They know not dressing in garments. They eat plants with their mouths. They drink water from the lake and ditch. Shaggy with hair is their whole body. Their head hair is like a lion's. With gazelle they jostle. With teeming creatures in the waters they delight. And so you can see that, again, these particular pre-Adamite beings, they were, Bigfoot type creatures, and that their bodies were covered with hair, their forearms were long, they did not cook with fire, or they ate only and drank only from, the land, much like a beast. As it says, the, the like a beast of the field, the pre-hominids, the pre-Adamites. Continuing just a little bit more, it says, it is a being, not a creature, Ninmah was saying. To behold it must be a thrill. To the house of life Enki led them. In strong cages there were some of the beings. At the sight of Enki and the others they jumped up. With fists on the cage bars they were beating. They were grunting and snorting. No words were they speaking. Male and female they are. And so, you know, it gives you an idea. And it also gives you an idea as to how they treated these particular beings. They kept them in cages, like in a zoo, like rats that are being experimented upon. And then if you go through the full story, it talks about how all the different things that they did in order uh, to modify and to heighten this particular being in fashioning a slave race, these ancient hominids, and all the different things that they did. But I'm going to show you also that after they had succeeded somewhat with manipulating this particular being and creating a slave from it that could do menial tasks and be a servant unto them in some manner, that it was then that the Most High God, the Father of all, as they call him, that even the Anunnaki recognized a creator above them, that he created his own creature. And this is the Ha-Adam, the Adam. And it was this creature that they were just blown away at its sudden appearance. It says, A wonder of wonders it is in the wilderness by themselves to have come about. Indeed, a wonder of wonders it is. A new breed of earthlings on earth has emerged. A civilized man has the earth itself brought forth. Farming and shepherding, crafts and tool making he can be taught. So was Enlil to Enki saying, let us of the new breed to Anu word send. Of the new breed word to Anu on Nibiru was beamed. Let seeds that can be sown, let ewes that sheep become, to earth be sent. So did Enki and Enlil to Anu the suggestion make. By civilized man, let Anunnaki and earthling become satiated. Anu the words heard, by the words he was amazed, that by life essences one kind to another leads is not unheard of. To them, words back he sent, that on earth a civilized man from the Adamu so quickly appeared. That is unheard of. The Lost Book of Enki. All right, continuing. Let's skip this question. It's going to take a little bit more to answer that. All right, let's see. This one is with regard to the flat earth. It's by Graham P, and he has a way to measure the earth, he says. The more I learned, the more I believed it. I have read lots of books, purchased a hardcover flat earth key to unlocking the book of Enoch. Came to the conclusion that no matter how much evidence you have, the globe lie just seems too big for people to believe the earth is flat. I was at the point of trying to go to Antarctica to see the no midnight sun. Then I came up with a way of measuring the earth. I had to find a way without using unverifiable measurements as a basis. Long story short, I have come up with a formula and the results do not fit. And the flat earth model we have and the globe actually suits the results. If I have it wrong and work with better, I need to find a flat earther who is good at math and can check my formula and tell me if I have it wrong and work with me to do this. So if you're one of those that is good with math and you'd like to help out this individual, let me know and I'll put you in contact with them. I did hear a show just recently too by Cliff High, which many of you know and are aware of his work with the web bots. But he was speaking about trigonometry, and he was saying that he couldn't believe in flat Earth because all navigation, he says, was conducted with the use of trigonometry. Whereas, it's interesting to me that there are official NASA and Department of Defense documents which state in context that the Earth is a flat, non-moving, stationary plane, and that a lot of the mathematics, even with the military using their railgun, which you can hit a target at 100 miles distance, that they put a laser to pinpoint the target, and the only way that they could do so is if there is no measurable curvature, which there is not. And that's one of the things that's easy to determine, and one of the things that absolutely verified in my mind that trigonometry and the globe and all that is completely false. I mean, the fact that you can put a laser beam on a target at 100 miles distance, you couldn't do that if the Earth was supposedly, dropping at 8 inches per mile inversely squared. And, the curvature should take the target out of view. And there should be a mound of water in between you and that target, which would not allow you to place a laser um, to pinpoint it. It would be impossible. I mean, and things like that. The fact that you can see lighthouses at 30 and 40, 50 miles distant, the Statue of Liberty, things like that, mainline islands and monuments and statues and cityscapes um, at these extreme distances, it verifies that there's no curvature, because if there were curvature, the amount and the rate of such curvature should make impossible viewing these structures or seeing these lighthouses at these extreme distances. It just would not be possible, because there would be, for instance, seeing Oahu from Kauai at some 90 miles distance, that it should not be possible, because the according to the amount of curvature, there should be a mile of curvature, and that the island should be 1 mile below the horizon, making it impossible to view, considering that the elevation does not go up that high. And so the fact that you can see even the bottom of the island all the way to the tops of its peaks on a clear day from Hawaii, Kauai, I mean, should be impossible. But yet people are seeing it and witnessing it with their eyes every day. All right, continuing. This is from Damien. Hey Zen, my name is Damien. I've been listening to you, and I'm trying to put the events in order from start of creation to the fall of Adam and Eve. Can you tell me what happens first in order? Is it creation, then the fall of Satan, then the earth becoming dark and void? Yeah, I can absolutely tell you, and it's very simple, that all you have to do is go to the story of Genesis. Pull up Genesis 1. And I would also advise, for those that want to know in greater detail the timeline of creation and what is being spoken about in Genesis, to get my book, The War in Heaven, The Great Contest, the first book, The Great Contest 1, The War in Heaven, and I go through the Genesis timeline verse by verse, and I explain what is being spoken about. So let's look at this, and I'll describe. I'm not going to elaborate, and I'm not going to do the Hebrew word studies, but you can find all that information in my books. In both the firmament and the war in heaven, I cover this in great detail. But in Genesis 1, in the beginning, God, Elohim, created the heaven and the earth. All right, so you have the Elohim, that's the Trinity, with the angels, even though it's the Most High God, the Godhead, the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. They don't need any help to create. It was through Yeshua as the Word, He spoke the creation into being in all aspects of it. But He did that as being the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, 3 in 1. And so that's where we see John chapter 1. In the beginning was the Word was with God, was God. And he, as the light, He spoke the creation into being, which is exactly what it says in the Sefer Yetzirah, the book of creation. All right, so looking at verse 2, we see that all of a sudden and we covered this in a show that I just did with Professor Truth on the angel rebellion. I just released it on our YouTube channel. You can go there and get greater insight on this as well. But in Isaiah chapter 45 verse 18, and also in 2nd Esdras, he says that He created as a perfect work, and that he created it to be perfect and to be inhabited. And that, in fact, he did do so, that the Father, through the Son, had created the creation in perfection, and then through harmony had established it in such manner, but that because of the rebellion of the angels and the attempted overthrow of Christ and his dominion over the angelic hierarchy, that they had to accommodate the rebellion of the angels, and that it says in let me go to it actually in the second book of Enoch, at the very in chapter 29 and verse 30, it says that when they were cast out, it was on the second day, and that the the bottomless, it was still formless, that it had been destroyed. And so, in my opinion, it shows to us that because of the war in heaven, the earth had become wasted, had become vain, and it was destroyed. And because it was destroyed, even when Lucifer and the angels were cast out, and it says in a different text, I forget the exact one, but it says that they were knocked out for a long, long time, several years, until they came to. And they came to over the bottomless, that the earth was not yet restructured and reformed. And so in the second book of Enoch, it says, "And for all the heavenly troops I imaged the image and the essence of fire. And my eye looked at the very hard, firm rock, and from the gleam of my eye the lightning received its wonderful nature, which is both fire and water and fire. And one does not put out the other, nor does one dry up the other. Therefore, the lightning is brighter than the sun, softer than water, and firmer than hard rock. And from the rock I cut off a great fire, and from the fire I created the orders of the incorporeal 10 troops of angels, and their weapons are fiery, and their raiment a burning flame. And I commanded that each one should stand in his order. And one from out of the order of angels, having turned away with the order that was under him, conceived an impossible thought, to place the throne higher, to place his throne higher than the clouds above the earth, that he might become equal in rank to my power. And I threw him out from the height with his angels, and he was flying in the air continuously above the bottomless. And then on the third day I commanded the earth to make growth great and fruitful trees, and hills and seed to sow, and I planted paradise, and enclosed it and placed as armed guardian flaming angels, and thus I created renewal." And so you can see that when they were cast out, the earth was wasted, and that they were flying in the air continuously above the bottomless, which the bottomless is the abysmal chasm which is found at the North Pole. It's the entrance into Sheol. All right, and so continuing. All right, and so back to Genesis. I'm bring out a couple more points. And so they were cast out, and they were cast down, and it was during this second chapter 2 where it says, "And the earth was without form and void." That is tohu wa bohu in the Hebrew. It means a deserted. The earth became or becomes a deserted wasteland and an indistinguishable ruin. And darkness was upon the face of the deep. That it was chaos. It was void. It was destroyed. It had become completely, utterly wasted, as I spoke about. Do check out the show that I did with Professor Truth. We cover this in great detail. And the Spirit of God, this is the Ruach HaKodesh, the feminine aspect of the Godhead, moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. This light that is being called forth in verse 3 is the Father, Yahweh Elohim, calling forth the Son, Yeshua, the Word, the Memra, the Logos, the Word of the Lord. And he is the light of the world, as it says in Revelation. And so God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And this light is Yeshua being revealed to the creation. And this is also when Christ, as the light, was revealed to the angelic hierarchy. That the angels, the morning stars, they were sitting in darkness. They could not see. They were able to contemplate and they had thought, but they could not see the creation. All they saw was darkness, much like staring into a dream. And then all of a sudden, God called forth the light. That light was Christ. And then the entire universe became visible. And they saw everything for the first time, the expanse of the creation. And that's when the morning stars shouted for joy. In verse 4, and God saw the light that it was good, and God divided the light from the darkness. This is where you have the forces of good and evil, light and darkness being separated. And the darkness is Legion, Satan, the adversary, and the 1/3 of the angels of the Most High, which joined him in rebellion. They are the darkness, and the darkness was divided from the light. And then in the next verse it says, and God called the light day, and the darkness he called night, and the evening and the morning were the first day. Now notice that it says in verse 4, and God saw the light that it was good. Does not say the same about the darkness, because the darkness was not good. It was evil. And so here in the first 5 verses of Genesis, you have the war in heaven, and the creation of the heavens and the earth, then the war in heaven. It was created perfect. It was created not in vain, but to be inhabited. But then it became destroyed because of the rebellion of the angels. And then becoming destroyed, we see that from verse 1-3 onward, you have the reestablishment, the beginnings of the reestablishment, the separation of light and darkness, the division of the forces of good and evil for what would become the great contest here upon the earth, the struggle for the souls of humanity uh, by Legion and by Yeshua, the light. And so, and then immediately in verse 6, you have, let there be a firmament, the rakia, in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters. And this barrier, the firmament, the rakia, dividing the waters, is put into place. And in my opinion, it was done on the second day, the same day that the rebel angels were cast out. And it was put into place in order to imprison them and to lock them into this time-space dimensionality, in my opinion, and to prevent them from escape, because it would be here that judgment, the judgment of death, which was levied upon them, as it was upon Adam and Eve when they fell and were cast down and cast out, just like the rebel angels were, that they were put under the authority of death. And then they were banished here to the earth. And they were here, like I said, from the second day onward. And they were here before even the creation of modern humanity or all the creatures being created, as we see in verses 8, 9, 10, and on, that you have what is witnessed and what is described in all these verses as the coming forth of the creatures, kind after its own kind. And so that's the story. Um, so, you just have to revisit Genesis and it tells you the whole tale right there. But you have to understand what is being spoken about in the first few verses because those verses are so loaded, packed with information. And so when you examine them and you study the ancient Hebrew and you get greater insight into what occurred and what has been occurring in them, you'll see that, there's a lot more. The gap theory, all that is contained and spoken about. Oh, also, for those that are in the chat that have questions, I'm not able to speak in the chat room this evening. I don't know what's going on, but it won't allow me to add. And so Carol is adding up the questions, and I will answer them and get to them as I can. All right, continuing. This is a question from Shane. He asks, you also mentioned on the 13th of December that there were no homosexual actions between Lucifer and Adam, but in Lucifer, father of Cain, you referenced the Colburn Bible where it says Adam and Eve fell asleep after drinking the potion from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and both fell asleep. When they awakened, they both realized they had been sexually violated. Is the Colburn Bible not reliable? I wouldn't say that it's not reliable. In fact, there's a lot of things in the Colburn that, in my opinion, are inspired and truthful. But again, whenever something contradicts what is brought forth in the fullness of the biblical narrative and the foundation of the canon, that I establish my truth there first, and that all the other stories I take into consideration and I share them with you as possibility. But again, I established my foundation upon the inspired, what I know to be the inspired word of the Most High God, which, according to the work of Ivan Panin, and even with what Bill McGregor and I have been doing with the tuning fork, I know without a doubt that the King James, it was given and granted to us in the way that we now have it, and that the Most High wanted us to have it in that manner, and that even the Bible codes that are contained and found encoded over all of that material and all of that work, it's another verifying confirmation as to the inspired nature of the text. But I do like to read and study and share all these other accounts. But again, um, whenever they contradict or they are not exact to what is revealed in the scriptures, and I'm not talking just about the Bible, but in a lot of the extra biblical, the fullness of the truth that I've come to know, then I will always stand on that truth. But yeah, I think there's something to this whole story about that is revealed in the Colburn Bible, because it also mentions that Cain basically is a child of the serpent, um, from this rape that took place. And so I know for a lot of you, you probably don't know what I'm talking about, so I'm going to share this story with you, and we'll probably end it with this because it's so very deep. But I want to share a couple passages first before I go into the text. It says, from the Wisdom of Solomon, For God created man to be immortal and made him to be an image of his own eternity. Nevertheless, through envy of the devil came death into the world, and they that do hold of his side do find it. That's the Wisdom of Solomon, chapter 2, verses 23 and 24. And in the Apocalypse of Adam, it says, And God created that sea of his own good pleasure, for he knew what would come of the man he would make, so that after he had left the garden on account of his transgression, men should be born in the earth. Because again, it was to the earth that we were cast down and exiled to. But that previously we were in paradise, which is above the third heaven. All right. This is the story of the garden as found in the Qumran Bible. Within the garden land was the sacred enclosure, the domain of Fanvar and Aruth, forbidden to those of the children of God who had now come to this place. It contained the chalice of fulfillment, granting any who drank from it the realization of all things to which they aspired. None might drink from this save Fanvar and Arua. Also there was the cauldron of immortality, containing an essence distilled from the fruits growing in the garden, and this guarded against mortal ills. Outside the sacred enclosure, known as Geysar, but forming a gateway into it, was a circular structure of stones called Gilgal, and within this was a shrine, wherein was kept a sacred vessel called Gwenduvia. This was like a goblet and was made of rainbow-hued crystal set in gold with pearls. Above the cup appeared a shimmering moon-colored mist like a thin cold flame. At certain times when the heavens were in a proper position, the Gwenduvia was filled with moon dew and potions from the cauldron within the sacred enclosure, making a pale honey-colored liquor. And this the people drank from the goblet. However, there were different proportions in the vessel for those of the blood of Fanvar and Aruth, and those who were the children of God, but not of their blood. It was the potion from the Gwenduvia which kept sickness and disease away from those who drank it. Dedam, the first father, married Letha, and they had a son called Herthu. Dedam then married Maeva, who had a daughter not by him, and this was Gweneva, the cuckoo child fathered by Ambriminid of Gwarthon, son of Namtimnigal, whom we call Luid the Dark Father. That's what they reference as Lucifer in this particular text. About the land of the children of God was the wasteland where the Yoslings, called the children of Zumat, which means they who inherit death, dwelt. Amongst these, Namtinigal, the wily hunter, was the most wise and cunning. He alone was unafraid of the children of God, and he alone dared to enter the garden land. In the days when Istartha was teaching, Namtinigal often came to hear her words, and the children of God were not displeased, for teaching the wild men about them was a duty. All right, I'm finding my place. Namtinigal therefore participated in their rites, but could not partake of the elixir from the Gwenduvia, because this was forbidden, while it gave health and strength to the children of God, safeguarding them from the sickness of the Yoslings. If given to others, it caused a wasting away. It was also altogether forbidden for any of the children of God to mate with the Yoslings, for this was deemed to be the most unforgivable of sins. Now the wily one learned much from Astarta, and in the fullness of time brought his own son to her, and he became as her son, living in her house and forsaking the ways of his people. Astarta called him Luid the light bringer, for it was her intention that he should be alone. He should be taught the ways of those who walked in the light, that he, Bank, might in time enlighten his own people. Luid grew up tall and handsome. He was quick to learn and became wise. He was also a man of the chase, strong and enduring, a hunter of renown. But there were times when the call of his people was strong, and then he would go out furtively in the night to indulge in their dark rituals. Thus he became knowledgeable in the ways of the flesh and in the carnal indulgences of the body. Dedam, which that's the name of Adam in this text, Dedam became a servant of the sacred enclosure where the misty veil between the realm could be penetrated. For all those having the blood of Arua had twin sight, an ability to see the Ras and the Sith folk, the Ansis and spirit beings, all the things of the other world, not clearly but as through a veil. Besides, the place called Geyser was a pleasant parkland with trees of every kind and a stream, also thickets of flowering bushes, and all manner of plants growing lushly. It was the custom of Maeva, that's Eve in this text. It was the custom of Maeva to wander there in the sunshine, and Luid also went there. So it came about that they met among the trees. Maeva knew the man but had shunned him in the past, and now she saw he was handsome, possessed of many attractions, and so her foot was stayed, and she did not run away. As the days passed, they dallied longer together, and Luid talked of things Maeva had not heard before. She felt of stirring in her blood, but did not respond or heed his temptations, because of the things which were forbidden. And so Luid went to the Moon Mother, the wise woman of the Yoslings, and telling of his desires, beseeched her to help him. The Moon Mother gave him 2 apples containing a vile substance which they had drawn through their stalks. This Luid gave to Maeva, who then became helpless in his hands. They met again after this, for Maeva became enamored toward Luid, but it happened that she became ill with a strange sickness and was afraid. Then Dedam became ill, and Luid also. And Luid said to the woman, you must obtain the pure essence from within the sacred enclosure, and Satina, the Moon Mother, will prepare an elixir which will cure us. Then he said, because none of his kind had ever been able to obtain the sacred substances, though they had always coveted what had been denied them, now because of her frailty, the woman was pliable in his hands, and Luid seized the opportunity. To achieve his ends, Luid gave Maeva a potion which had been prepared by the Moon Mother, and she administered this to Dedam and those with him, by guile and deceit, so that they fell asleep. And while they slept, Maeva stole from the sacred substances and took them to Luid, who gave them to the Moon Mother, and she made a brew. Part of this was given to Maeva, and the rest was drunk by the Yoslings from their awful and Keitel during their night rites. And when the morning came, they were all smitten with grievous pains. And before the sun set that day, all the Yoslings were stricken with a sickness such as they had not known before. Maeva took what had been given to her, and finding Dedam, laid low in his bed and gave him a draught vessel, though she had to use womanly wiles to get him to drink it. She drank the remainder, and they both slept. But when they awoke in the morning, both were suffering pains, and this was something they had not known before. Dedam said to the woman, what have you done. For what has happened to us cannot be unless the things which are forbidden have been done. Why, Lord, I was tempted, I fell, I have done that which is forbidden and unforgivable. Dadam said, I am bound by duty to do certain things, but first let us go into the place called Beth Chris, where I will seek enlightenment. So they went there together and stood before the shrine beneath the tree of wisdom. There they were filled with an inflowing vision, seeing themselves as they were and as they should have been, and they were ashamed. He because of the proper path of a man, and she because of her falsity. There in the reflecting contamination of the woman was revealed, and the man's heart shriveled within him like a flower licked by. They saw a great spirit being materializing in the reflecting mist, and he said to them, woe to you, the greatest of evils has befallen the race of the children of God, and it is defiled. The heritage of Karanampa is lost. The fetid of the woman results from the incompatible intermingling. But it is not all. Disease are also generating from the ferments of the impure implantation. So basically, she, found herself pregnant with Cain, and that also opened them to disease, and they were no longer, spiritual beings of their bright nature. Okay, uh, let me know if it is better or not. I'll speak a little bit slower. Dadam said, the fault is with the woman, wherefore should I suffer? The spirit being replied, because you two are now as one. The cankerworms of disease and sickness strike both equally, but you shall not again defile this place. Henceforth, the misty veil becomes an impenetrable barrier, severing our two realms from each other, so they can no longer be easily spanned. Between us, there will now be no means of communication. Henceforth, man and woman, okay, good. Henceforth, man and woman, fated to unite in love divine, shall be divided and set apart. Though ever yearning reunion, they may cleave one to the other, seeking the unity which will rekindle the flame. But unless their efforts transcend the limitations of earthly things, they will be in vain. The spirit of man is now severed from the whole and cast again into unconsciousness, and it too shall long for reunion with the whole. The spark shall seek to return to the fire, for otherwise it becomes nothing. The web of fate is rewoven and the paths of destiny remade. The design of life is redrawn. Again, the progression begins in ignorance. Birth and death, pain and pleasure, joy and sorrow, success and failure, love and hate, peace and war. All the light and shade, the many hues making the splendidly intricate pattern of life on earth. This is a new beginning, but a beginning not in purity and unencumbered, but one already weighed with debts and burdens. That's the Colburn Bible, the book of creation. And so you can see that, this story gives us an account, tells us that, they drank of this ritual, they participated in this ritual, and then they were violated sexually in whatever manner, and that it was during these violations that Eve was impregnated with Cain, this impure seed. And so, that's when Cain was brought forth. He kills his brother, and then we have the war beginning between the enmity between the seed lines. And so, even in the Colburn Bible, you have the truth of the enmity between the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent, encoded and veiled. And yet, most people have no idea. Um, most of the children of Adam know nothing about their enemy or that they're cousins have been contending with us and have been dominating and ruling over us since the garden, and it's only been because of the help of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit throughout the generations of the seed of promise that we have made it thus far, and that the the seed has been preserved, have been protected, even with Noah, and the ark, and Moses and the bondage of Egypt, Abraham and the promise to his children in the 12 tribes, that they would be the nation of among all the peoples of the world, that the Most High would work through Israel. After he divorced them, after they rebelled against him, just as Lucifer did, then it was Gentiles were grafted in, and Paul went unto the Gentiles to bring the. So now salvation is extended to all. God bless all. Good night.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.